Oh, what is up, everybody? So I want to do this little walk and talk, get some sunlight today, and talk about Joe Rogan is moving to Spotify today. I know it's not quite September 1st, but he announced via his Instagram and via his Twitter that since is what is it? October 1st, not October, September 1st. I'm sorry, September 1st. In Australia at 7 p.m., I believe, Eastern time, either that or Central Standard Time. He's going to be going live with Duncan Trussell for his first Spotify podcast. Now, let's talk about it. Spotify is owned by Microsoft, so it's another subsidiary of big tech, of billionaires. It's not to be trusted out of the gates, but whenever there is competition, it is a good thing. Whether or not they are billionaires in control, because let's be honest, guys, that's the only way they allow these platforms to thrive, is if they have huge money behind them or can be acquired by huge money. That should be very, very apparent with what has recently happened to BitChute and DLive. DLive being just eviscerated in the media as some kind of a platform for what? Racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and they do the same thing often with BitChute, actually making it so when you click on a BitChute link now over at Twitter, it tells you that this could be malicious or spammy content, right? Malicious or spammy content. Now, Rogan himself has talked about the fact that, you know, this was a money move. It really wasn't because of free speech. He wasn't coming for their throat, despite the fact that Alex Jones said this was it. He did a full segment on it. He had to pull some of it back. I remember at one point, Tim Pool started reporting on what Alex Jones had said about Joe Rogan, and YouTube and Rogan called him on the air. However, I do think that this is more than just a financial move for him. And I do think that this is a good thing in the sense that with the success of this video podcast, there's a chance that Spotify will open up video podcasts to other creators, maybe even such as myself, and you would have a rival platform for at least that type of material, right? Spotify might say, well, we're not going to put anything up there that is under 30 minutes or under 60 minutes. But as you guys know, I mean, I put out a ton of content, and, you know, a 30 to 60 minute broadcast or even beyond would not be something that would be that difficult to put together daily or almost semi-daily. So this hopefully is going to be a new avenue where people can speak up, and maybe, just maybe, Joe Rogan speaks out about even more, even though, again, I think as far as mainstream personalities, and let's face it, it doesn't get much more mainstream than Joe Rogan, he does a pretty damn good job. Doesn't mean I don't think that he plays it safe sometimes. That doesn't mean I don't think that he has blind spots. Doesn't mean I think the guy is perfect. But compared to a lot of the other people's out there, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I mean, and his podcast is extremely listenable. Let me just go over some of the really important ones that I think people need to listen to kind of understand the importance of this thing. So while I drove out to Iowa and then back, I listened to several of them, but the one with Tom O'Neill, the author of Chaos, the book about the Manson murders and the possible connections to law enforcement and the Central Intelligence Agency, not only was that a gripping almost 3 hours, it really helped tell the story of the Central Intelligence Agency, why we don't have the documentation on Mind Control Ultra, whether or not those programs actually stopped, whether or not those programs were in any way successful. He talks about the multitude of brothels that the Central Intelligence Agency used on both coasts. So during this time and of, you know, the summer of love and beyond, what did they have? Again, they had brothels that they had set up in New York and California, where they would use local prostitutes to dose Johns and experiment on them, get information on them, see what they could do. What they don't really mention in the podcast is many of these prostitutes were underage. All right, so I want you to think about that long and hard. That these women that they were utilizing and using in the MK Ultra programs to trick people who were off the street and sometimes target people for sure were underage. All right, and they were often paid in what? Cash. So there was no record of those transactions. Look up a guy named George White if you want to understand how horrific of a human being that guy was and how horrific these programs really were. So props to Rogan for doing that one. It's actually a few months old, but another aspect of that is that Rogan actually, at least if he doesn't read the book, he listens to the book in audio form. So he's somewhat informed, and he's not just saying, well, that can't be true or this can't be true. He did a really good job in that podcast. So, once again, we can only hope that Spotify is going to open up this video podcast format to people like myself and others, because, what will I do? I'll take a day's worth of my programs and I'll put them together on one loop. And then not only will I have the audio version, but the video version. And let's be honest, I think that the video version of my show is a lot more powerful, not just because there's imagery, right? This is a walk and talk. Sure, this doesn't have all the imagery of the other ones, but because you have the headlines, you have the direct quotes, you have the government documents, you get the facial expressions of the guests. Again, I just had an amazing conversation with Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond about everything COVID 1984, where we're at on the tests, where we're at on the lockdowns, where we're at on the movement into an automation nation, a transhumanism push, all that stuff. And, we're able to at least bring up some of the articles out there that are talking about Sweden and herd immunity. And we're able to talk about the numbers of deaths per 100,000 in Sweden, again, that didn't lock down, didn't wear masks, compared to Belgium, Spain, Germany, and Italy, in which, and I believe Britain's in there as well, in which they all did better than them per capita. And none of the media talking about it. And we need not only the media talk about it, but we need you guys to talk about it, to tell people, to not just post that gotcha moment on Facebook, to not get in a fiery battle of name calling, but to present information in a manner that is digestible and that you can have a conversation with somebody about it. For instance, I know a lot of you guys that are on my Facebook know the troll Adam, right? And not Adam, my brother, but the other Adam there. I'm not going to throw his last name out there, but he constantly trolls my page, and he's constantly a wise guy. And so with this whole contact tracing and the tests basically not working and giving false positives, he said to me, and I thought it was going to be a troll at first. He said to me, well, what would you do, Jason? Seriously, this is a serious question. What is the gold standard on these tests, etc.? What would you do? So I said, first of all, and by the way, only 39 thumbs up. Can we double that to 80, please? A little bit more. I said, first of all these kids that came back to school, they didn't even test them with these tests that are going to be faulty. And I go, that's number one. I go, the private college next door did test before you could even come on campus. So they knew there were going to be positives. They banked on that. This was done on purpose. If they can test, okay, and they did 3,000 kids in 48 hours for this thing, they could have tested them before they got to campus. And then I said to him, on top of that, there are no isolates of this. So the gold standard in testing in other countries globally was not a PCR test. It was not a swab. It was none of those things. It was those kind of things combined with literal CAT scan chest x-rays, looking at your lungs and seeing if there was levels of damage, as this was a very different respiratory illness, still not talked about. And from there, he was kind of surprised. He's like, wait, are you telling me that they didn't even test the kids before they came back. I'm like, yes, that's what I'm telling you. And, you know, I think it was the first civil conversation I'd had with him on that platform in months. Now, you might have to tolerate some nonsense, but again, when you actually personally know somebody and you can reach out, they'll surprise you sometimes. For instance, he's actually the one that sent me the article from marketwatch.com talking about how some scientists believe that Sweden has achieved herd immunity. And one of the points that I was making to Ryan earlier is, you know, we're not even talking about that anymore. Instead, we're parroting WHO talking points, right? The head of the WHO just put out another video on Twitter talking about how there's been these massive outbreaks when there were stadiums filled or people were gathering at religious gatherings. It's all lies. Show me one deadly outbreak from any large gathering that's happened. One deadly outbreak, not some case-demic where there are a bunch of people that are asymptomatic like we have here in Oneonta. We have one person out of 3,000 with 105-degree fever. Let me repeat that. Out of 3,000 plus tested, they've got one person with 105-degree fever, and the other 100 plus that they tested are either showing no symptoms at all or very, very light ones, if that. Okay, so let's go down the line on just some of those events that have taken place, and there have been no huge, massive outbreaks. Sturgis, 250,000 people. 250,000 people get together in South Dakota. So number one, they came from across the country all over. Then they got together. They were in enclosed areas with one another. They were not wearing masks. We showed you a multitude of videos that people were living their normal lives. Well, they tried to hype like one person, you know, tested positive after. Where's the deadly outbreak? We should have already had it. We should be seeing it. Portland. The protests in Portland have now been going on for several months now. Where's the explosion of COVID-19 cases in Portland? They don't exist. I went to a sporting event with 3,500 people, 3,500 people in Iowa. Now, over 5 weeks ago, where was the outbreak? It didn't exist. The Hamptons had that Chainsmokers concert. Anybody can type it in. Chainsmokers, Hamptons concert. You can see thousands of people, not social distancing, enjoying one another's company, having a good time. Guess what? No deadly outbreak. Protests in New York via BLM took place for weeks and months. You saw these throughout the country. Where are the outbreaks? They're now weeks old. People always go, well, you can't tell yet. We won't be able to tell for another couple of weeks. And then the couple of weeks go by, and then they act like that didn't happen. All right, and that's why we need more free speech. We need more platforms. We need to find a way to bring this information to people where it's not a gotcha moment, where they care more about the truth than they do about just being right. And I know that's going to be difficult, but we got to try to do it, folks. And remember, I'm fully demonetized on this platform. What you just heard may or may not be harmful content to the powers that be. So please consider giving to the GoFundMe that is linked below. $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Big donors need you now more than ever. My sister has agreed to come out to Iowa with me, which is great. It is not going to be cheap. And I literally, just before this video, texted the landlord of one of the places that I saw, the bigger place, and I'm hoping to hear back from him so I can get this locked down and hopefully get this property and start boxing everything up and getting ready for the old New York exodus. So thumbs the video up on the way out, guys. Not even 100 thumbs. Subscribe and share, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for joining me.